Flirt FM, Galway's alternative radio station.
You're listening to the Galway Gamer here on Flirt FM 101.3. My name is Owen Murphy and I am the Galway Gamer. And joining me on the line at the moment is a man who, almost no matter which video game you've played throughout the years, you probably heard this man's voice in one way, shape or another.
Maybe you have.
Very, very possibly. He's played such characters as Rusty in Rad Riders. He's been Jack Boyd in This Is the Police, Big the Cat in the Sonic the Hedgehog series, Captain America in Avengers Galactic Storm, but you know him as Duke Nukem. Jon St. John, welcome to the Galway Gamer, sir.
Hail to the Galway Gamer, baby.
It's a pleasure to have you on here, sir. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm just, with this time difference, I'm just having my first cup of coffee of the morning. So you got me at a good time, because I usually wake up on the right side of the bed.
Excellent. It is quite a time difference. It's creeping into evening time here in Ireland at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little about yourself then, John. You started off as a radio presenter as a teenager. How did this give way to your career as a voice actor?
Oh, well, it was kind of a natural progression. I started as a teenager in radio, and as I grew and learned the ropes in the business, I started doing morning radio, and I had to do character voices. Mm-hmm. And then for many years I was a production director, which meant making all those commercials. I needed to change my voice up for, all of the different commercials I was doing, so it didn't sound like my voice on every commercial on the radio station I would work for. So many years of practice of changing my voice until one day I finally ran into, by chance, a casting director who asked me if I wanted to get into video games. So radio was kind of a natural progression into voice acting for me.
And you've lent your voice to just countless games at this stage, John. Did you ever get the time to sit down and play any of these?
I did back in the day. I used to love to play the Duke Nukem 3D. Shadow Warrior is one of my favorites. I like the Twisted Metal games. Mm-hmm. But about the time my son turned 12 or 13 and would kick my ass in the first couple of seconds of play, that's about the time I lost interest. And I've never really had a lot of time for games because I've been busy working, trying to make a living. So I've never been a gamer. I've always been an actor, not a gamer. But, I had some time that I enjoyed playing. The Duke Nukem 3D game, playing across a modem with my brother who was on the other side of the country. That was a lot of fun back in the day.
You've also voiced Sergeant Alan Smith in America's Army True Soldiers on Xbox 360. This series was created by the U.S. military. Now, I'm not sure if you know, but the U.S. government and the U.S. military were originally quite against first-person shooters. But when these games came out, then they used first-person shooters as a kind of a way of recruiting people into the military. What's your take on that?
Well, there is a certain set of skills you acquire by being a video gamer and by, playing first-person shooters. Let's face it. If you're the kind of person who likes to shoot guns and wants to shoot at the enemy, and, a certain set of skills are acquired by playing that. Look at today's military and all of the tech guys who are flying drones, for instance. They all started out playing video games. So there's a certain skill set that does lend itself to the military. So I can see how that happened and why. And anybody who really just loves shooting guns and playing games like first-person shooters probably is well adapted to shooting at real people at some point. I don't know.
That's fair.
God, that sounded terrible, didn't it? that one's going to come back to haunt me.
Okay, well, let's move along then to your world, if you will, of Duke Nukem. And first of all, before we get to Duke himself, now you voiced Dr. Judas Haskell in Iron Fury, but you also voiced General Silverback in Duke Nukem Land of the Babes. Are there any specific challenges that come with playing the role of the antagonist as opposed to the good guy?
Oh man, I love being the bad guy in every game. Judas Heskel was one of my favorite roles to play. I'm able to channel some kind of angst or anger inside of me. I think maybe it's the anger I have toward any one of my 3 ex-wives. I'm able to channel that into emotions that fit those characters well. But no, those are the best roles to play. Those are meaty roles. Being the good guy hero is fine, but being the bad guy lets you, just lets me be somebody I'm not really. And it's exciting to play the part of the bad guy. And like I said, yeah, I can channel some anger and focus it into my performance.
Well, sticking with Ion Fury then, the new game stars Shelley Harrison, but it exists within the Duke Nukem universe and also uses the Duke 3D engine, so it's got that old school mid-90s feel to it. How do you feel about a new character essentially taking over from Duke there?
Well, I can tell you how and why that actually really happened. The Bombshell game that you're referring to with Shelley was originally a Duke Nukem game, and I had recorded all of the Duke Nukem lines for it. What happened was that 3D Realms and Gearbox got into a legal battle over who has the rights to Duke. To this day, Gearbox has all the rights to everything Duke. Gearbox, 3D Realms is now out of the Duke game, which is really sad because it was their character to start with. But, when you sell off all the rights, that's what happens, right? So they sold all the rights to Duke, and Gearbox came after 3D Realms when they were putting this game together and said, no, you can't do a Duke game. We own it now. And so they had the game, I think, about 3/4 done. And said, okay, well, let's switch this around and let's make the hero a woman. And they wrote Shelley into it. And rather than, dump me from the game, they said, hey, do you want to play the part of Jadis Heskel? And I went, yeah. And that's how that happened, actually.
Excellent. Okay, cool. I was quite interested in it. I'm quite interested in Ion Fury in general. I am patiently waiting for it to drop on console next week so I can get involved in it. Looks like an absolutely magnificent game. But let's go back to the 1990s then, and let's go back to classic first-person shooters like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, for example. They both had silent protagonists. It was when Duke Nukem came along that the personality exploded in FPSs. How did you approach bringing personality to an entire genre?
Yeah, I had no idea at the time. I'll be honest with you. It was in 1995. I was a production director at a radio station here in San Diego where I live. And just by happenstance, Lonnie Manella, who was one of the top casting directors at the time, was in my studio to record a car dealer ad. And while we were setting up the microphone, she was doing all these wacky voices, and I figured I'd kind of show off, and I started doing wacky voices on my microphone just, for level checks. And she said, wow, you have quite a range. Would you like to try acting in video games? And I kind of laughed, and I said, what? Acting in video games? It was 1995. There were no voices in video games at all, except maybe Joe Siegler's voice in Duke Nukem 2, that little side-scroller where he went, I'm back. Right? Other than that, there were really no voiceover roles. She said, well, that's about to change, and this game is going to be, personality-driven. There'll be a lot of lines for this character. And so it wasn't really an angle I was taking on how do I make this character something. I had no idea it was going to be anything. When I recorded Duke Nukem 3D, I thought, okay, well, it's just another game, no big deal. And it turned out to be a much bigger deal than I ever thought it would be. And so after that, it wasn't until, I'll be honest with you, 1999 or 2000 before I even knew that Duke Nukem had a following and people, really liked the game.
Oh, really?
And then in about 2002, when I started getting invited to conventions, then I knew that I was a part of something much bigger.
That's amazing. Considering just how big Duke was in my world before 2000, it's amazing to think that as you sat there doing Duke Land, you had no idea how far he was going to go.
Right, I was absolutely clueless about it.
Let's talk about some of those lines then. We hear Duke doing a couple of more unusual things than many of the other characters throughout the years. Even nowadays, we hear him burp, we hear him urinate, sing "Born to Be Wild," all this kind of wacky kind of stuff. What lines were the most challenging lines to cut?
The ones that were funny that I had to read without laughing through. And that was even more of a challenge, by the way, when we inserted Duke into the Bulletstorm Full Clip Edition game. Because a lot of the writing for that game was very modern, edgy, funny. And Steve Bloom had done the original character, lead character Grayson in that game. And they said, well, we want to put Duke in it. So we're going to adapt a lot of those lines that Steve originally read for you to do. I said, okay, fine. When I got in the studio to read the lines, they were so damn funny. It was hard delivering them without laughing. So that's been the biggest challenge.
And where did the voice of Duke itself come from? Where did the inspiration for that voice come from?
Well, the inspiration is in the original recording session for Duke 3D. Lonnie Minella was with me in the studio in San Diego, and George Broussard, who was the owner of 3D Realms at the time, was in Garland, Texas, and as we were trying to develop the voice for the character, George originally said his thought for this tough guy character was something akin to Charles Bronson. You remember the actor Charles Bronson? And I went, Charles Bronson kind of sounds like this. You know, he's kind of a tough guy with this kind of... And he goes, no, I don't think that's it. And Lonnie chimed in and she said, think more of Dirty Harry. You know, Clint Eastwood's line from Dirty Harry. And I went, go ahead, make my day. Do you feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? And George said, that's the right tone. But now think of the character all roided up, and he's huge and muscular, and this guy has balls of steel. And the second he said, this guy's got huge balls of steel, I went, oh, well, I'll just do that voice lower. Do you feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? And right there, George said, that's the voice I want. Right there, do that. And as it turns out, very fortunate for me, because this is the easiest voice to do that I've ever done. I can talk like this 24/7 without ever causing any, stress on my vocal cords. It's easy. It's kind of in my natural range. So that's how it came along, really. And I'm so glad he picked that particular voice because it's so easy to do.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Let's talk about Duke's last big outing, which was Duke Nukem Forever. It was ill-received, and the character was kind of branded, the comedy in it was kind of branded as sexist and somewhat outdated. Do you think there's still a place for characters like Duke Nukem in the 21st century?
I do. I think it's all in the way you spin it. And here's the great thing about bringing Duke back, if and when they ever do it, is the comedy is there. All you need is a sidekick for Duke. So Duke comes back. Remember Duke 3D and how that all went down, to kill off all the aliens. Ultimately, at the end of the game, Duke nukes the planet. And he does take out all the aliens, but he takes a lot of humans with him, unfortunately. And then Duke disappears, right? So he comes back decades later. Older, but still strong, still a tough guy, and still a misogynistic son of a bitch womanizer, right? So give him a sidekick. So when Duke comes back, his sidekick could be like, dude, come on, we don't talk like that anymore. What's wrong with you? If you ever want to get laid again, you got to treat women right. You can't say stuff like that, man. Right? And there's the humor right there in a sidekick who has to keep correcting Duke because he's so outdated, with his expressions and his behavior toward women. And perhaps that could be the way to do it. That's just my thought.
You reckon bring him back almost as a parody of himself?
Exactly. And let him, self-deprecating humor is great. At some point, let Duke make, fun of himself. Because he realizes that he's, a relic from the past, and he's got to update his whole being.
All right, but just to finish up then, John, we've seen Duke make cameo appearances left and right over the last couple of years. We've seen him, as you mentioned, in the full clip edition of Bulletstorm. We've seen him in Rad Rogers through an update as well. Do you know of any future Duke Nukem games in the works? Will we see him again?
I am not aware of anything going on right now. The only thing I can tell you is the people at the top at Gearbox said they want to make another Duke Nukem game. They're ready to do it, but there are a couple of things you have to keep in mind. The way Duke Nukem Forever was received was so harsh that the press was so bad that, of course, they're skittish about it. It's like, really, we're not going to put out another Duke Nukem game unless it's written perfectly, unless the game engine is spot on, unless all of the elements of the game are perfect. We're not going to risk killing the franchise by disappointing people or making them the brunt of, bad video game jokes again. So, and I totally understand that. I'm afraid so much time is passing by, though, that, Duke is kind of getting left behind and could be forgotten. The fan base is dwindling. Trust me, as the voice of the character I know, the fan base is dwindling because Duke has been forgotten about, basically. But I understand exactly why Gearbox wants only the right game before they finally commit to doing it, because they can't risk another hit like they took for Duke Nukem Forever.
And if you got the call from Gearbox tomorrow, would you voice Duke once again?
Always. Until the day I die, I would like to be the voice of Duke. That's my favorite character. I know he's an outdated, misogynistic son of a bitch, but I did bring him to life with my voice, and I would like to continue to be his voice until I can't anymore. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. Do you? Huh? Do you? You smartass.
Fantastic, John. It's been an absolute pleasure having you in the Galway Gamer. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And, long live the king, baby.
101.3 Flirt FM.